Right. So today's topic is responsive design. And the idea behind responsive design is that the market and the people that are accessing our websites today has been changing dramatically in how they're accessing our websites. Right. It used to be that you had it was a browser, it was a desktop, perhaps a laptop. And but these have been evolving, and things have been getting smaller and smaller. Now we carry computers in our pockets, and the screen size has become very varied, right? So the clients, the clients that are accessing our websites has diversified quite a bit, right? And what we want to be able to do is create applications that can adapt, right, to the different types of clients that are going to be accessing our websites. Yes, the biggest growth in traffic today is your phones and tablets, right? So we have to think about that demographics, right? What are we going to build for them? If that's the biggest growing segment, right? So we should start thinking about them first, right? What are we going to show them? If they're going to be accessing our phones, it's not. Definitely we don't want them to access a page where they have to zoom in, right, and zoom in, zoom out, zoom in, zoom out. It's very annoying, right? We have to show them something that it's usable for them. And some designers today, we say that we design for mobile first. We first start to think about what are we going to show the mobile user. And then we can think about later on what to show the people that have larger screens, right? One advantage of designing this way is that it really makes you think really hard on what is the most important piece of information that you want to show the user. It really distills, right, and filters in your mind, right, in your design. What is it that the 3 or 4 pieces that you really want to show, and then and you should show them first, right? Perhaps towards the top of the page, or not too far nested within your site, right? Because they're going to be clicking, and they're going to be scrolling with their fingers and whatnot. So we want to make it as fast. So definitely we want to do that. Also, if we're going to have to create applications for mobile, for tablets, for desktop, we're going to be creating 3, 4 different types of applications, right? Or can we create an application, one single application that can somehow scale across various platforms, right? Different clients. Instead of creating 3, 4 applications, parallel applications that we have to maintain 3, 4 applications simultaneously, can we reuse most of it, right? Can we create it in such a way that it's only one application, but it adapts? And we don't say that it adapts. We say that it responds. It's responsive, right, to the various types of clients. That makes sense? Same application, but it responds and behaves differently depending on the client that you access. All right? Okay. A lot of the mechanisms that we're going to be working with to make it responsive are going to be depending on this mechanism that we saw already 2 days ago, the float. Right? Let's look at a very simple example, and we'll see that most of the website, a very simple website, it is already responsive. Right? Let's create a very, very simple website. All right. So here. Oh my goodness. All right, so 450 experiments. So we're going to create here. Let me stop this. Let's create a folder in here where we're going to be creating all our responsive stuff here. So let's do responsive. And in here, let's create our first experiment, a new HTML page. So 000.html. Not a good naming convention, but keeps me sane, that it's chronologically listed what I worked on first. So anyway, so simple, responsive, or simple. This actually is a trivially responsive page. Okay. If I just say here H1 responsive, and we just do a paragraph here, and perhaps we fill it in with lorem ipsum. Fill it in with that, and let's run the application. Let's run this page. So there it is, right? Let's create a whole bunch of these paragraphs. Let's refresh. If you notice that if we resize the page, right? This is perfectly fine for a phone, right? You go to a phone and notice that it's as you make the screen size smaller, right? The whole thing squishes, right? And as you make it big, it just adapts to whatever size page you give it, right? Notice that there is no scroll bar at the bottom, right? Remember that a scroll bar at the bottom is unacceptable, right? Unless there's a very good, compelling reason why, right? Right. Notice that there is no scroll bar at the bottom, so this is a perfectly responsive page. I didn't have to do really anything, right? The browser already squishes the contents and wraps the content around to make it adaptable to the size of the screen. Make sense? So this is already responsive. Okay, but let's look at something a little more complicated, right? Say I have let me copy this. Copy this, and let me stop this. Oops. Okay, there it is. I stopped it. And let me rename this. So this is 00010. Next one. Okay. So say I start giving sizes to these things, right? So let's change all these to divs. Change these to divs. All right, and let's can you see that? It's too small, right? Let's remove all these. And let's do the same thing, right, with divs. Right, same thing. Let's run that. It's pretty much the same, right? It's the divs. The only difference perhaps is that there's no spacing, there's no margins between the divs, right? There's no margin between them, right? But it's still responsive, right? It still squishes the text around. It's still responsive. Typically, what might happen that the content that we're adding here will have a particular width, right? That we're forcing a particular width. That's when things start to get somewhat complicated, right? When we are forcing things to have a particular width, then we are overriding the behavior. Notice that the behavior of divs and paragraphs is because they are block elements. They take up the entire width of the window, right? If the window's bigger, it grows, right? If it's smaller, then whatever the 100% of the size of the window. But if I'm a designer, I might want to have control over that, right? I want to say, no, I want this to be 100 pixels and that 200 pixels and that whatever, right? I want to have control of the look and feel. So I might find myself styling these divs, right? Saying that these divs are going to have a particular width, right? Let's choose something small for now. 100. Okay. Let's refresh that. Notice that they became small, right? Notice that it repeats. It repeats. It keeps going. Perhaps let's add some padding at the bottom so that we can distinguish them, right? So maybe some margins, margin at the bottom, maybe some 5 pixels below it. Maybe 100 is too small, maybe 200. There it is. So there's some spacing. Let's create some more spacing, maybe 10 pixels. There it is. So there's 10 of them between them. There they are. There they are. Right. And typically It might be that I start also creating columns, right? Like we did on Tuesday, right? Where we start putting these things side by side, right? So let's see. Let's start using things such as float, right? Like float left. Okay. Notice that now, and also let's create some margins. Actually, let's create a whole margin just around it, the whole margin around it. There they are. Notice that there they are. So it's columns. Notice that if I make this bigger, right, there's enough space to hold another one. You see that, right? If I keep making it bigger, there's a space yet for another one, right? So here's content that more or less behaves like the text used to behave, right? Text behaves such that you know, whatever width I have, I'll go all the way to that width. When I don't have any more, I'll just wrap, right? So here's something that is a little bit the same, but with bigger chunks, right? Where you have a div that has 200 pixels, and again, it flows, right? Everything has a float left, meaning that anything that is next to it on the right-hand side will just flow around it, right? That's what each one is doing, right? Everybody's being pushed to the left, and anything to the right, it just flows around it to the right, right? So these are all being pushed to the left, and everything just flows with the content, right? So that, and when there's not enough space, right, it just wraps. So this too is already responsive, right? Right? It's just responsive. It says, oh, I don't have any more space. I'm not gonna put a horizontal scroll bar, right? That's a no-no, right? There's no more space. I'm just gonna wrap, right? Make sense? There it is. Okay. Typically, perhaps this might be inside of something that is centered. We're not gonna do that. We're not gonna do that just yet. That makes sense? Everyone still follow me? This is fine responsive. Notice that there's plenty of things you could do, right, to avoid you know, that scroll bar at the bottom, right? Okay. There's plenty of opportunities to wrap. Now it might be that responsive might be that if you have a bigger desktop, perhaps, right, I might want to have bigger columns, right? So that the content, since you have a big desktop, perhaps I can merge these two so that they take up you know, a bigger space, and then merge these two, right? As you make it smaller and smaller, then it says, oh well, you know, there's not enough space to hold it this way. Perhaps let me reduce the width, right? And that's what we're gonna learn how to do today, right? How to respond, how to change the look and feel depending on the width. Right now, it's just using the standard, the default wrapping mechanism. Okay, I want to have more control over that. For instance, one thing that I might want to do is that if it's in a form, right? If it's in a desktop, perhaps I might want to make I want to display the form this way, right? A label, and then a form element here, right? Where you can type, right? Here's another label, right? And then maybe a drop down, right? If you have the entire desktop, yes, right? But if you're on a phone, I would like to dynamically, right, change this layout so that it changes, so it displays like this instead, right? Vertically instead of horizontally. I want it to display vertically using on the label, right, and the drop down. That makes sense, right? So this is not just wrapping. You know, I want to be able to control the look and feel on how things lay out depending on the size of the screen. So how do we do this? We could use JavaScript. Right? JavaScript allows you to you know, programmatically listen for the event of the screen, the window being resized, right? And then we can programmatically, you know, manipulate the DOM, right? But we don't need to. We don't need to use JavaScript. Instead, we're going to use an old-time technique that's been around for quite a while, but it wasn't used quite this way, right? We're going to use the technique of the media attribute here. Okay. Excuse me. Right. So the media attribute allows you to target different types of media. Right. What types of media? Well, you could target, for instance, print media. Right. So, for instance, when you're going to print, you might want to eliminate any background images. Maybe you don't want any ads, right? Perhaps you don't want any of the navigational part, right? You just want to print the documents, right? Just the content. Also, you might want to choose a font that is friendly to the printer, right? So I like to be able to do these things, right? So Add Media allows me to do that, okay? So that the browser, knowing what the output is going to be, right? If it's a printer, it allows you to choose different stylings depending on what the media is. Screen is the screen. Okay. This says if what this says it allows you to create a Boolean expression that says if these things are true, then apply these CSS rules, or if these things are true, then apply these other CSS rules. So now those CSS rules, now you can put them inside of somewhat like an if statement, right? And so you can make them logical, right? You can say, if the screen is this, then use this style sheet. If the screen is that, then use this other style sheet, okay? And you can put style sheets that are outside of the Add Media, which apply always, right, regardless of what the size of the page. So perhaps you could put those styles that are common to all sizes, right, outside of the Add Media, but then put inside of the Add Media those styles that are particular to one desktop, one screen size or another screen size. That makes sense? So what this says, right, it says if we are displaying to the screen and the size of the screen is less than 500, then apply these styles. If it's less than 700, then apply these other styles. Okay? And you can create also ranges. You can say, if it's between this size and that other size, then apply these styles. So you can put, if it's screen and minimum width is so-and-so and maximum width is so-and-so, apply these styles. That make sense? All right, let's play around with this. Let's play around with this. So let me stop that. All right, so let me copy that. Just copy that. And this will be 020. Okay. So the styling that I'm going to do is, if I run this, this is media experiment. Notice what I'm doing. I'm doing the styling inside of the HTML, right? And I told you that's a no-no, right? Remember I told you I don't want you to use styles in the HTML, but nonetheless I am using it, right? I'm only using it for academic purposes. It makes it easier just for changing and showing you right here and then what's going on, right? As opposed to dealing with two different files. Yes? All right? But on your assignments, I never want to see a style tag. I don't want to see a style tag in your HTML. All right? Okay. All right, so let me run this. Yes? Did I not say the HTML? Okay, you're right. Okay, that's fine. That's a good idea. That's a compelling reason to have it inside of one file. But anyway, there is no styling in the first assignment. There was a border? Oh, okay. All right.
So
actually,
you say to have the border, but it's displayed, and
yeah.
I wasn't sure if we were.
Yeah. Okay. Or not. All right. That's fine. That's fine. Also, somebody asked me, can we use HTML tables to lay out the data? And for some reason, I said no. You were, right? I totally spaced out on what you were asking me. Obviously, you could use table because it's tagged data. It is data, right? And so it makes sense to use tables there, right? Sorry about that. Right? It totally makes sense to use tables there. It is data. That's what it's meant to be, right? Tables. Do not use tables to make layout, right? To lay out pages. right? Instead, use divs or sections or whatnot. All right. Okay, so let me run this. Okay, that's media experiment. All right, let's play around with this a little bit. So here I can do something trivial. Let's say something like body and background color red. What's that going to do? It's going to take the body of the document and it's just going to paint it red. Yes, right. Regardless of the size of the page, it's always red. Everybody okay with that? All right. But what if I want to make it so that it's only if the size is of a particular value, right? We can look at the size if we do inspect, and we have at the bottom the console, and we start moving it around. Notice that at the top right corner it shows the current size of the window, right? So that's width and height, right? So so the maximum is 950. So half of this might be around 4 something, right? 450 or whatnot. Yes. So what we might want to do here, we could say, it says, no, I don't want it to be red all the time. I only want it to be red, oh my goodness. If the size of the window is beyond a particular width, right? So I could say I could put here a media, right, screen, and say max width, say 400 pixels. Okay, and in here, I'm going to put my body background. I'm going to put it in there. Okay, everybody okay? So let's see what that does. Right. Notice that now it's white, right? So it's not applying that red, right? But once I go below 400, look at that, right? When I go below 400, it turns it red. You see that? So that's like an if statement, right? It says if this, then that, right? So I can also create a range. So I could possibly maybe say, if it's between 400 and max width is 500 pixels. So if it's between that, I only want it red only if it's between 400 and 500. Yes, right? Let me save that. Let me refresh. So there it is. So it's white. So it's not applying that style. It's not applying that style. So once I reach 400, it becomes red, right? And when I reach 500, it no longer applies. Oops. That makes sense? Makes sense? So that styling only happens within that range. Make sense? Right? So I could create a whole bunch of ranges. I can say, for instance, that I can say media, screen, and max width, right? So meaning if it's below 400. Oh, thank you. Width. I'll say that I want the background. Let me make this smaller. All right, I want this. I want it to be green. So if it's less than 400, I want it to be green. If it's between 400 and 500, I want it to be red. I can create all sorts of ranges or breakpoints, right? I can create all sorts of breakpoints, right? So if it's between 500 and 700, I want it to be blue. And if it's greater than, right? If the minimum is 700, then I want it to be yellow. So all the ranges are taken care of, right? So it's between, if it's less than 400, it's green. Between 400 and 500 is red. Between 500 and 700 is blue. And beyond 700 is yellow. Make sense? Right? So I'll refresh. Right? So there it is. So we're below 400, so it's green. Between 400 and 500 is red. Right? And between 500 and 700 is blue. So when we get to 700, beyond 700 is yellow. Yes? Yes?
If you have multiple rules with different cast widths.
Like if they overlap, or what do you mean?
So when you get yellow, it matches with 300, then blue matches with 500, and the red 200. So which one would you
It'll lose the last one. The last one wins. So if you have conflicting, like if you have things that overlap,
Yeah.
right? The last one in the document order, right, wins.
It's not like the bigger number. Or
No, it's the last one order. So these rules are applied from top to bottom, from left to right. Yep. And the closer you are to the element, right, overrides anything else. Right. So the closer you are in document level. So the CSS might say something, right? Then style overrides the CSS files. Then the style attribute overrides the style tag. So you have 3 levels of override, right? So first the CSS, then the style tag, and then the style attribute overrides everything. Make sense? Right? Okay. All right. Blah, blah, blah. All right, so we could use this technique. We could use this technique to say, oh, I want my page to look one way at the phone level, right? And I want it to look some other way at the tablet level and some other way at the desktop level, right? We could say use these different CSS styling for targeting various devices based on the size of the screen. Everybody okay? Make sense? All right, and that's exactly what we're going to do. Let's see. Let me go back to my cheat sheet. Make sure that I'm covering everything. Yeah, so we did adjacent transitions, right? We did two adjacent transitions. You know, if you were less than or greater than, it applied different rules. We did that. Several adjacent breakpoints. We did that. We call these, right? We call these breakpoints. You know, when does a page break? Right, the width breaks so that it triggers a change in the look and feel. Right. All right, let's look at responsive forms. So, for instance, one of the things we would like to do is to do something like this, right? If the form, you know, as you are making the form smaller and smaller, the window smaller and smaller, and there's not enough space to hold the input field, we would like it to wrap, right? Let's do that. Okay. All right, so let's copy this. Copy this. So let's create a brand new page. Let me stop this. Actually, we can copy this, right? All right, go away. And let me rename this. This is 030 HTML. Okay, and 030, we're gonna have responsive forms. Okay, and the H1 is gonna be also responsive forms. Where are you? H1, responsive forms. Right. All right. So what we're gonna do here is we're gonna have a form using this div, right? If you remember, we talked about this a little bit when we were introducing CSS and we were looking at forms, right? I think it was either on Tuesday or last Thursday, I forget. That this was a good way of capturing input fields so that we can then style them. If you remember, this allowed us to excuse me. This allowed us to render the input fields vertically, yes, but then we would be able to style them in such a way that we could choose to make them vertical or horizontal, right? Remember what we're trying to do, right? That when we have enough desktop space, we want to show them horizontal. If we don't have enough desktop space, like if it's in a phone or in a tablet, we want to show them vertically. Yes, right. So let's do this. Let's run this 030. There it is. Right now is just vertical, right? It's just vertical. So when we have enough space, what we would like to be able to do, and the reason it's vertical, it's because of this div, right? We have the label. This is the label. That's the label here, right? Label. And that's the field, right? This is the input field. This is the input field. There it is. It's this one. This one over here. And the reason it's vertical is because it has its own div. Right? And then we have an outer div that just groups the label and the input field together. Yes? Everybody okay? Are you still with me? All right. So what we want to do is say that normally what I like to be able to do is that the fields, these guys, that the field label and the field are both float left, right? So let's copy that. Field label and fields, they both, I want it to be float left, right? Because I want it to be horizontal, right? So field label and field, I want it to be float left. And so if I render this, notice that it's now horizontal. Yes, the way I want it. But notice that everything else is also floating left, right? Because it's wrapping around it. So I want to clear that, right? I want to say no more. I don't want it to be. I don't want it to wrap anymore after the field. So to clear it, I'm gonna use the div that is wrapping my fields, right? The field group. I can just clear it. Right? I can say dot field group clear both. I can say no, I don't want any more. Clear both. Any more clear field group? Is that what I called it? If field and field and also field. Do I need to clear also field? Clear both. Oh no. Anyway, I need to do these paragraphs over here. P. I'm going to clear the paragraphs too. I'd say P. Clear both. There it is. So we have the field label, right? Floating left. If I copy, and I have lots of these forms, right? I can copy this form several times because I might have lots of form elements, right? If I refresh, notice that I have a lot of forms, right? A lot of form elements, and laying them out this way for a desktop application might be okay, right? To lay them out left and right, right, from left to right, horizontally. But when I start making my page smaller and smaller and smaller, it might not be as appropriate, right? So what we might want to do is to, depending on the size of the screen, I might decide that I want to show it horizontally. Okay. So what we're going to do, is that we're gonna say that this floating business over here, instead of always floating left, we're gonna say no. You're gonna float left if your screen size is bigger than a particular size. Otherwise, you should not float, right? You should do what you normally do, is to go from top to bottom, right? That's your default behavior, right? Only if you are on a big desktop and you have a screen size, larger than 400 pixels, then you are allowed to go horizontal. Otherwise, I'm not going to apply this styling, and I'm just going to make it go vertical, right? And I have that here. If I go here, I actually have it documented here. There it is. It's going to say, the logic says, if you are beyond 600 pixels, right? If you are beyond 600 pixels, yes, I want you to float left. Go away. Let me close that. I am in class. So the rule is going to say, if you are beyond 600 pixels, yes, float left. right? Otherwise, don't do anything. So let's copy those two rules. Let's copy those two rules, and let's paste it here. So let's replace all these rules here that I have, right? Let's replace that with the my media rule that says, right, if your minimum is 600, meaning if you're greater than 600, then you're gonna float left and whatnot, right? So let's do that. Let's refresh. Which one is it? 30? Yeah, this one, right? So let's refresh. Now let's resize. There it is. So notice that if I'm beyond 600, let's see the screen sizes. All right, notice that I'm becoming 700, so 680, 640, 600. Okay, there it is. So I went beyond 600, right? And I decided, hey, you must be in a small device. Yes, you should render vertically. That makes sense, right? You can apply different rules depending on the size of the screen, right? And that's how you can implement a form that is responsive, right? It adapts to the size of the screen. All right. Let's bring this over here. Container. So also, it might be that typically your page is not going to be take up the entire screen, right? This is a little atypical, right? Where the page just wraps, right? The content just takes up the entire page, right? And it starts wrapping. This is somewhat atypical. If you go to most websites, most designers, what they'll do is that they'll choose a particular size, right? They'll target a particular size or a subset of screen sizes, right? They'll target monitors that are 1024, right? Then they'll target monitors that are 800. They'll target things that are within 640 pixels, right? And then anything below 400, right? They'll target perhaps these 3 or 4 screen sizes, right? And then they'll have style sheets for each one, right? And it'll be a fixed size, right? You are either looking at this in a monitor 1024 or 800 or 640 or 400, right? Depending on those 3 or 4 screen sizes, and they won't have this wrapping all over the place, right? So let's look how we do that. So basically, what they'll do is that they'll wrap the entire content in a container, right? And that container will have a fixed width, right? That will change depending on the size of the screen. Make sense? So let's do that. Let's create an adaptive container. Okay, let's do that. Let's stop this. Let's say copy paste. There it is. Let me close that. Close. So this is responsive or responsive container. Let me just clear all this. Responsive container. What we're going to do is that we're going to wrap the entire content, right, in a container. We're going to say, here's my div, and my class is container. Container, right, and the whole content is going to be wrapped. There it is. If we run this, nothing changes. It looks exactly the same because we haven't styled the container, right? And what we want to do is say, well, at least I'm going to give you a width, and I want you to center, right? That's something typical. That's a very typical layout, right? I want a particular width and center. So to do that, we're going to style. We're going to say container. Basically, typically we say that the width will be something like 600 pixels, and we're going to say that the margins are auto, right? That's going to center our content. Right, 600. There it is, right? There it is. It's centered. But notice that it's not responsive, right? When we start mucking around with widths before, right? Before it took the entire width of whatever we gave it, right? Now we're fixing the width. We're saying, no, 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 the content, my content is 600 pixels. Now I run the risk of the dreaded scroll bar at the bottom, okay? Because I'm no longer letting the content just grow, right, and take up the entire content. I'm fixing the width. You see that? Notice that if I make it smaller and smaller and smaller, right? Notice that the scroll bar at the bottom. See that scroll bar at the bottom? Why? Because you told it to be 600 pixels, right? And it doesn't fit. It doesn't fit in the screen size, right? So what do? We need to make the content, the container. So we have two goals. One of them is, yes, I want to control the width, right? I want it to have margins. I don't want the content to just start wrapping all over the place. I want it to have a predictable look and feel, right? Predictable look and feel. But nonetheless, I want it to be responsive. So I wanted to, as you start getting smaller and smaller and smaller, perhaps the size should grow smaller and smaller. Okay, that container should start smaller, getting smaller and smaller. Actually, let's target something bigger. Like, let's see, what size was this? I think the highest one was 900, right? Yeah, 950, 947. There it is, 947. So let's target, say, 800. Okay, let's target 800. So normally it's 800. There it is, 800. That still gives us some padding around it, right? It's centered, right? But notice that we get the scroll bar right away, right? So what do? Okay, so what we're going to do is that we're going to put this inside of a media element, right? We're going to say, no, it's not always 800, right? It's when you have enough space, it's 800. Okay, when the size of your browser is bigger than, right? So what we're going to do is going to say, at media screen, and when the min width is, say, 900 pixels, then we're going to have at least 900 pixels. Then I want this to be 800. Right? So let's do that. There it is. So it works, right? But when I go below 900, notice that it goes back to the default. Right? See that? So when I go beyond 900, it fixes the width. Right? It's fixed to 800. But when I go below 900, it goes back to wrapping and whatever it's doing before. Right? What I want to do is control that too. Just want it to just get smaller and smaller incrementally. Right? What we might want to do is just target a couple of very well-known sizes. Okay. We might want to do is just copy this again. I might say that, if you are between, say max width, right? Max width is 900, and the min width is right, is, say, 700, right? So if it's between 700 and 900, then I'll choose, say, 600, right? That means that when it's 700, the size will be 600, right? That means that it'll give me an extra 100 pixels, right? That means that 50 pixels on either side of margins, at least 50 pixels margin, yes? As it grows and grows and grows, and it reaches 900, it'll be more margin, yes? But when it reaches 900, it'll go bigger, right? Let's look at it. Let's look at it. There it is. See, that's 600, right? That's 600, right? When I make it bigger, 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 pop, it makes bigger, right? It grows. See that? Right? Notice that I'm targeting. So this is what it would look like perhaps on a tablet, right? And this is what it might look like on a desktop, okay? With margins. And then if we keep going smaller, we don't have stylings for anything smaller, right? So let's target a couple more. So say if it's between, say, 500 and 700, right? Then we'll go 400, right? Let's refresh. There it is. So now I'm targeting 3 zones, right? So between 500 and 700, that's between 700 and 900, and that's beyond 900. Now, beyond 900, between 700 and 900, and then beyond 500 and 700. That makes sense? There. So you see how our website is now responsive, right? It adapts to the width of the browser, right? Notice that there is absolutely no reason why you should have that scroll bar at the bottom, right? You can totally control what's going to happen. Make sense? Right? All right. There's no excuses for that scroll bar at the bottom. The only one where I might consider that you might want to have a scroll bar is, for instance, we have a table data, right? We have a tabular data, yes, and the table data. Well, you know, it's whatever columns you might have on a table, right? And the data might just take up that much amount of space, yes, right? And you know, if you add up all the widths of each one of the columns of the table, right, it just might add up the width bigger than whatever width you have. It just doesn't fit on a phone, right? So tables no longer fit on a phone, obviously, yes, right? So that's the only case, perhaps, that you know, you might consider that. Well, yeah, okay, a table, but even then. Even then, what we might want to do is not make the entire page scrollable, right? But only the table scrollable, right? So you can still, with your finger, right, scroll through the table, right? And the rest of the page stays the same, right? It stays fixed as you scroll through the table content, right? So you scroll up and down, but vertically you have, you know, whatever space you want, right, for the table, as many rows as you want to display. But horizontally, you don't have enough space to display all the columns, perhaps, on a table. So you might allow, right, a scrollable within the table only, right, so that you can scroll through the table with your finger. Make sense? So not the entire page, but the table can be scrollable. And we'll look at how to do that in a minute. Okay. Let me look at my cheat sheet. What am I missing? Let's see. Okay, so responsive containers. So we know how to do responsive containers, right? And here's an example where I target various sizes, 600, between 600 and 700, between 500 and 600, and so on and so forth, right? Yes.
So I had made a site with like the same way that you did this with a responsive, and it would work when you would change the size of the window. But when I opened it on my iPhone 6, it didn't like see the difference in the size, and I had it set to 660.
Yeah, no. To be able to do that, you need to set the scale, right? iPhone.
Yeah, because I had only put
scale. What's it called? Viewport. Thank you. Viewport.
Okay.
Viewport Meta. So what the iPhone by default, what's going to say is that, well, it's a page, right? So I'll try to render it the way it would render on a desktop, right? And so it squishes everything down to whatever it would look on a desktop. So you want to stop that, and you can stop that. There's a things towards the bottom, I think.
Is it just the iPhone that does that?
No, it's across anything that uses WebKit, right? So WebKit is a standard across. You know, Android also uses WebKit. Okay. Mozilla uses Mozilla uses something else, but it's the same standard. The viewport. What is it? No scale, I think it's called, or no scale. I forget what the okay, I think it's initial scale 1, and user scalable no. Right, so you put the initial scale, right, and it says no, it's 1-to-1, right? It's whatever I'm showing you. Don't scale it down to try to fit the whole thing on a desktop. Okay, and the viewport. So you're setting the meta of the viewport. Okay. Excuse me. All right. So, yeah. Now, last class on Tuesday, we looked at creating grids, right? A grid system, didn't we not? Right? We created a grid system that allowed us to, not have to think about floats, right? It allowed us to think in terms of tables, right? In terms of rows and columns. Remember that we did that on Tuesday, right? We created columns that spanned one column, spanned two columns, spanned three columns. Remember that, right? Right. I think I have it here, right? I think I have it here. CSS grid, right? This was the experiment that we worked on. Right, yeah, so we got up to all the way to column 8, right? And what this allowed us to do is to think about the layout, right, in terms of rows and columns, right? Remember that? Now the problem with this is that this grid system only worked for that particular size of screen, right? Notice that I believe the width, the outer width for this grid was what? Let's see. It was in style sheets. Let's look at the style sheet. The style sheet. Right, we're at the bottom rows. Here are the rows. Yeah, 780. Right. Remember we did, the closest thing to below 900, but was divisible by 12. Remember that? Remember we did that? And then what we did is we created column 1, column 2, column 3, and so on and so forth. And these were just increments of 65. Remember that? No? Yes, sort of. Maybe we should go over this real quick. If you remember in the grid system, right? We had a div that was a row, right? And in that row, right? Basically, what the row was just this, right? It was just a div that did clear everything, right? And just set a fixed width of that row. Yes? Make sense? Right? Everybody okay? It's a row. And in there, what do? We put several divs of columns, right? And we said the classes were column 1, column 2. And these were, how many columns we wanted to span across, right? So this was one, this content, whatever content we have here, I wanted to span across just one column. Yes? So all of these, as this first row over here, this first row is this first row over here, right? It's this first row over here. Yes, right? Notice that everything is floating left. Column 1, column 2, column 3, column 4. They're all floating left, right? Right, all the way to the end. And then at the end, right, the row, because it's inside of a row, the next row just would clear the whole thing, right? It would start a brand new line. So here's a row of columns that span 2 columns, right? Here's content that spans how many columns? 2 columns, right? How does it span 2 columns? Because the style says that the width is twice as big as the 1 column, right? The 1 column is 65. What do we come up with 65? What was that? It was 780, isn't it? It was 780 divided by 12, right? 780 divided by 12 will give you 65. Column 2 is 780 divided by 12 times 2, right? So it's 65 times 2. It's 130, yes? Right, everybody okay? And so on and so forth. Column 3. Oh, we didn't have column 3. What happened? Did we not do column 3? We didn't get to it, right? Oh, we didn't get to it. So column 3 would have been what? I guess we must have run out of time, right? So column 3 would be, 65 times 3. Anybody? So 65 times 3. It's 195. Right, so it's 195. So in the grid, if I want to make a row with columns that span 3 columns, I'm going to say I want a new row, right? And then in there, I want a column that spans 3 columns, right? And I want to, here's the first column. I'm just going to copy this. So how many columns of 3 columns are there? 4, right? because 3 times 4 is 12. It takes up the 12. All right, so there they are. So I have 4 columns, right? Column 1, 2, 3, and 4. If I refresh the grid, wait, did I mess up? Wait, where did I copy this? I'm sorry, I put it here. I wanted to put it at the end and move it towards the end. Let me move it towards the end. There it is. But now it's the last one. There it is. This last one. This one. Right? Notice that it spans 4 columns, right? And I can keep going, right? I can keep going. Right? I can do column 4. That's, you know, a column that spans 4. That's why that's 65 times 4. That's 260. 260. And if I want a row made up of all columns that are of size 4 columns, how many do I have? 3, right? There's only 3 that can span 4 columns. You know, because 3 times 4 is 12. So this is div class column 4. This is column 1. How many do I have? Just 3. 2 and 3. Obviously, the content is kind of misleading. Let me just copy lots of these. So if it doesn't fit, notice that it spans all the way across, right? And then it starts wrapping. It doesn't have enough space, right? And then it just wraps within the same column. Yes? It's behaving like a table, right? It's just behaving just like a table. You know, it's almost like if this were an HTML table, right? And this would be a TR. This is behaving just like a TR, right? And this is behaving just like a TD, correct? Right? And this class, it's almost behaving like what? A column span, right? Your column span, your span across how many columns, right? This is spanning across 2 columns. This is spanning across just 1 column. This is spanning across 4 columns, and so on and so forth. Right? There it is. So we have column 1, column 2, and we have column 3 here. I'm just filling it up with dummy data so you can see the content is really, you know, displaying in columns. You see that? All right. Let's do one more, and that's it. Just one more. So here's 5. Okay, so how many is that? That's 265 times 5. Oops. 65 times 5. 325. 325. And so here I want a new row. Class row. And in here I want 1 column of 5 that spans 5. So column 1. And I want another one. 5 plus 5 is 10. Right? I'm left over with how many other columns do I have left? I have space for 2 more columns, right? Yes? Right? So if I leave it like that, I just leave it like that. Notice that I have, there it is. This spans 5 columns. Notice that it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this spans across 5 columns. This one also spans across 5 columns. You know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? And I have 2 more left over, which I never put anything in there, right? I can leave it blank, or I can fill it in. I can fill it in with what? I can fill it in with 2 1s or 1 2. Yes? Right? So say I fill it in with a div class column 2. That means I am filling it in with 1 column that spans across 2 columns. Yes? Right? So it's column 3. There it is. So it spans 2 columns. Make sense? That makes sense? All right. The problem here is that this is not responsive. This is not responsive, right? Right. This might look fine on a desktop, but we have the problem that because the outer rows are all fixed width, right? It's what is it, 780? Is that what it is? 700? I forget. Because they have a fixed width, if I start making this smaller, notice that I have the dreaded scroll bar at the bottom. See that? What do? What do I need? What can I do? I want a grid system, right? Because I don't want to have to deal with these floats and all this business. And so what I could do is I could make various versions. I could make various versions of the grid system. One grid system for when the width of the page is 600. One grid system when the width of the page is 400, and when it's below that. That makes sense? All right. So let's play around with that. Right. Let's play around with that a little bit. That will give us a chance to practice somewhat. Let me stop that. So let's see. Copy paste. And this is 050. Okay. All right. And so what we're going to do here. All right, let me run this. Let me give it a name first, right? So this is responsive container. No, it's a responsive grid, right? Responsive grid. Responsive grid. So the H1 is responsive grid. Okay. Let's run this. Let's see what it looks like for now. Okay, so right now the containers looks like it's responsive, right? The container looks like it's responsive. Okay, so we want to make the grid also responsive, right? So let's target a couple things. Let's see. All right, that's when it's really, really big, right? That's when it's really, really big. And what's the width here? Right, that's what rule is that? What rule is that? Let's see. It's this one, right? It's 900, right? Correct? It's 900. If that's true, then the row for my grid should also be 900. Yes? And then all my columns should be what? 900 divided by 12. Yes? All right, that's a very inconvenient number to divide by 12. Let's see. That's 900 divided by 12. Oh, it's 75. Oh, it's basically what we were using earlier, right? But I'm going to choose something simpler, right? I'm going to choose something simpler. I'm going to choose a trivial example, 600, because 600 is easy to divide by 12, right? So 600, I can divide it by 12. It gives me 50, right? And then what? Each column, the smallest column is 50 pixels. The next size column is 100, right? The next one is 150. The next one is 200, right? Isn't it? Right? So it's easy. It's easy. So let's do that. Let's choose here my grid. I'm going to say that my row, in this case, is going to be that the width is going to be 600 pixels, right? And then I would have the columns. Yes, I would have to create all the columns for each type of column that spans, right? I'm not going to do that whole thing again. I'm only going to do it for columns that span half and half, right? You know, that spans 6 and spans 6. Yes, right? Let's do that. Something very, very simple. So column that spans 6 columns. So the width will be what? Will be 600. Well, the half, right? It's 300 pixels. 300 pixels, right? Column that spans half of the columns is half of the size of the entire table. Make sense? Right? All right, if that's true, all right, and all of these float left, right? Float left. And the width of the rows, they clear both, right? That's what you do, right? So let's create the grids here. Right? So here's my grid. I'm going to say div. I want a row, right? And I want 2 columns. The 2 columns are going to span half and half. You know, span 6 columns, span 6 columns. So they're going to be the same side by side, right? So we're going to have div class column 6, right? And I want some content in there. So perhaps let me grab something from lorem ipsum. Let me copy that. Let me paste in there. And I'm going to have another one. Right. Let me refresh. There they are. Right. Notice that this is half and half. Right. It's half and half. and it's only 600 and 600. I mean, sorry, this is 300 and this is 300. And it spans only 600 across. Yes, right. Notice that what happens when I make it too small? What happens? I no longer have that that row, and I no longer have the column definitions, right? Because that grid is only if, right? Only if the size of the screen is greater than 900, isn't it? Right? I'm gonna change that. Actually, it's not looking very nice. Let me create my own media here. I'm gonna say media screen, right? And when the minimum width is, say, 700. Right, in here, and I'm going to create my own here. I'm going to say, if it's greater than 700, then apply these rules. Did it cut? Oh, no, I didn't cut. I'm removing it from here, and I'm putting it in a different rule. I'm saying, if the size of the screen is at least 700, then use the 600 width grid. There they are. Now it's good. Now it's good. Right. So let's look at the page size. Let's look at the page size. Right. Notice that the size is 800, so it's greater than 700, right? So everything's good. Everything's good up until you reach 700, right? When it reaches 700, then it no longer is a grid. Yeah, it no longer has the left, right? The float left. It no longer has the clear. So it goes back to the default behavior of how divs work, right? They just grow vertically. Yes, right? Instead, what we might want to do is just make the grid smaller, right? Just make the grid smaller, so that between, say, between when it's below 700, right? We could say, right, that if it's max width is 700 pixels, right, and it's above. Put it here. Oops, sorry. If it's above min width, say 500 pixels, okay, then I would want my grid to be smaller, right? So for instance, let's choose a nice number that it's easy to divide, right? So let's say 400. So let's choose 400. So I'm going to copy these columns and rows. I'm going to paste it here. I'm going to say, okay, if it's 500, then I'm going to make my grid 400. So I'm going to still have that margin around it. So I'm going to make it make this 400, right? And half of that is 200, right? It's 200. So let's refresh this. And there it is. Now I have a responsive grid, right? If I'm bigger than 600, my two columns grow. Right? I have enough space to put more content. If I go below 600, then I'm going to shrink my grid, right? And both of my columns grow, smaller as well. But they follow more or less the same layout, right? The two column layout, right? And this might be okay, right? Where if it's a desktop, definitely you have enough space to show two, maybe even three columns, right? If you go to a tablet, then two, maybe not three columns, but maybe two columns is enough. Yes, right? But maybe those two columns should be a little smaller. That's exactly what we did. And notice that if we go below 500, notice that it goes back to the vertical rendering, which might be perfect. It might be perfect rendering. That if this is in a phone, right, and you are below a particular size, right, don't show them in side by side, column by column. Okay, just render it vertically. That makes sense? Yeah, makes sense. That is not 424. What time is that? 4:30. Oh man. Okay, that one. Okay. The other thing I wanted to show is responsive menu. Actually, I'm just gonna upload the experiment and make it available to you so you can see it. Actually, I have it here, I believe. Where is it? Experiments. Experiments, responsive grid, menu. Where's menu? Oh no, which menu? Responsive grid, container, form. Brew, I don't know which one is it. Is this menu? No, that's not it. All right, I'll make them available so you can use them. Basically, you know, the menu, it might be that when you have enough space, you show it vertically, right? I mean, horizontally, you see, you know, the menu, the navigation line menu, right? Because you have enough space. But when you start making it smaller and smaller and smaller, and you don't have enough space to show the entire navigation, what do? You might want to collapse it, right? It says collapse and not even show the links, right? And perhaps when you collapse it maybe into a link that if you click it, then it shows the menus. Make sense? So that's what I wanted to show. Anyway, let's do it here. Remember, I'm going to be in my office between 4:30 and 6:30. If you want to come and chat, I do have a meeting with my TAs between 4:30 and 5. So you might want to wait till 5. Right. Other than that, thank you.
Wait, what you just said was you said you will be in your office?
I will be in my office. I just the first half hour I need to meet with my TAs.